Here, so I'm doing this video from inside my house. I've never really done a video from in here before, so I imagine that the sound is probably like pretty hollow sounding up in this room. But the family went out for trick-or-treating, and the oldest boy wanted to go to a party, so I am sticking around in case he calls and wants to come home. And the rest of the family is out trick-or-treating, so I'm here doing live stream with you guys. All right, so in today's video, we are going to continue to discuss how the de-dollarization is going to look. And this is something that I find pretty interesting topic, especially considering how a lot of people are pretty much adamant with the idea that they will be like out of the dollar, not using the dollar. Dollar is going away, and that eventually the BRICS nations will be the rulers of the world. And somehow almost like rooting for this to take place. Like they really expect this to happen, and that's the way it's going to end up going down. So what I find pretty interesting about this concept that people have like convinced themselves that the dollar has failed, it's not going to exist anymore, and it's only a matter of a short amount of time or just a matter of time, which I mean, I guess it is a matter of time, but like to me, how do you conduct yourself in the short time that you have here on this earth, and what it is that you plan on doing with your money? And now, if you think that the dollar is going to fail and the BRICS nations are going to rise, then ultimately, then you would have to dump all your money that you have towards dollar denominated assets, and you would have to get into things that are like, gold and Bitcoin and physical items, or other assets that are denominated in those currencies in which that you think are going to end up being like the winners, right? And that would be like, the renminbi or something, like going and having faith with Chinese government debt. You're going to go and invest all your money into India. This is like the idea that the BRICS nations are going to do so much better than the dollar is, or that the dollar is going to fail. Then that's what you would have to do. You got to put your money where your mouth is. And then most people will sit there and say, yeah, the BRICS nations are going to rise, the dollar is going to fail, but yet they'll go to work every single day, go in and collect a paycheck, deposit that paycheck into the bank. They'll go out there and buy stocks and bonds and buy everything else for their retirement, and yet still complain that the dollar is going to fail. And I'm thinking, well, how much faith do you have and believe in your own ideas? Now, I personally, I think about it, my own position, like, you guys know I talk about it all the time, but I'm mostly in cryptocurrencies and precious metals. Like, that's the majority. If I was to liquidate everything I have, well, I guess if the real estate, if I count the equity in the house, if that's true, then I guess the equity in the house would be like my biggest position. But other than that, like I really don't have that much cash position. I have a little bit of an emergency fund. I have enough to operate and pay my bills. I have some set aside so that I could take advantage of a downturn if the economy happens to, or if the markets or whatever, or buying opportunities happens to come up. I have a little bit of position for that, but it's not that much. It's pretty small. Everything that I have is mostly outside of the dollar. It's outside of stocks. It's outside of real estate. It's in precious metals. It's in Bitcoin. Now, I do have a lot of that Bitcoin set with a third party. I got it at Coinbase, and a lot of people will argue with that, saying, "Dude, don't have it at Coinbase. That's a bad idea." I get it. I know. Whatever. Right? I don't have that much worry about it. So in my mind, yeah, I am outside of most dollar denominated stuff, right? I'm cryptocurrencies, I'm gold and silver. And that's what I feel most comfortable in. And I would continue to take on that position, knowing that it doesn't have anything to do with the dollar or any other currency for that matter. It's just that it's its own thing, right? And so I'm not into it because I think that the dollar is going to fail or that the other nations are going to do better or worse or anything like that. I get into cryptocurrencies and I get into gold because I'm a libertarian. That's why I do it, right? That's the only reason why I do it, is because I like the freedom aspect of it. Everybody else can be like, hey, it's going to go to $1 million and all this other stuff. I'm not that way. It's like, okay, that would be awesome if it did, but I'm not really expecting it to happen. Wanted to read just a little bit here from this paper. I'm pretty sure I left a link for it. I didn't double check, but you could easily find it. It's from the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, Fed Notes, June 23rd, 2023, the international role of the US dollar, that's in parentheses, post-COVID edition. And this is a pretty interesting little article I don't know, paper thing that this, who wrote this thing? Who did write this? Uh, Carl Bertau, Bastian von Beschwitz. Sorry if I butcher the name. And Stephanie Crew. Interesting. Anyway, I don't know any of these people, but because I really just follow FOMC. But this is pretty interesting. Some of the stuff that they talk about in here. One of the things I just wanted to bring up was foreign investors also hold. This is reading directly from this paper. It says foreign investors hold a substantial amount of paper banknotes, as shown in Figure 4. Now, I'm going to show you here, and again, I'm really low tech, but essentially this is Figure 4, so you can see that it's been rising quite a bit, right? This is chart going back to 2005. And it says here, the value of US dollar banknotes held abroad has increased over the past 2 decades, both in an absolute basis and as a fractional of banknotes outstanding. Federal Reserve Board staff estimates that over 1 trillion in US dollar banknotes were held by foreigners at the end of 2022, roughly half of the total US dollar banknotes outstanding. Now, this is pretty interesting to think about because really it's like these are like basically like the paper money, like the currency that's out there, right? The paper banknotes. And it's growing in significance on the amount that's out there. Now that would make sense considering how much that they have actually printed up over the last few years, but it's on both cases, not only like the amount in dollar forms, but then the amount in percentage, like how much of the money is actually out there held by foreign investors, and it's a substantial amount. I mean, it's dropped a little bit, but it's pretty much the highest it's ever been. And then it goes on. It goes on to say this. Additionally, many foreign countries leverage the effectiveness of the US dollar as a store of value by limiting the movements of their currency with respect to the US dollar. In other words, using it as an anchor currency. Goes on to say the dollar's usage as an anchor currency has increased over the past 2 decades. They estimate that 50% of the world GDP in 2015 was produced in countries whose currency is anchored to the US dollar, not counting the United States itself. In contrast, the share of world GDP anchored to the euro was only 5%. Now, the euro is like the only second up runner to ever possibly take over as a world reserve currency. If anything, it's going to be the euro. And the euro, as it was 50% of the world GDP in 2005 was produced by countries whose currency is anchored by the US. This is not including the United States itself. In contrast, the share of the world GDP anchored to the euro was only 5%, not including the euro itself. Moreover, since the end of, I don't know, this Ilzeki, I'm not sure what that is, but anyway, the sample in 2015, this anchoring has changed little. See, this is important to understand. Like, this is the reason why, like, the rise of the BRICS nations, yeah, sure. It can happen, double, triple, keep going. It's like so far away from what it is that the dollar is doing. It's not even like, in sight, Okay, I don't want to bore you too much with everything that's in here, but because you guys, like I said, you should go read it yourself. There's really some good information, but there was another spot here I wanted to read from. What was it? Okay, the diminution of the US dollar status seems unlikely in the near term. Now, this is pretty interesting to think about some of the things that they have to say. There's a lot of good stuff in here, really, but anyway, it goes on to say this. Near-term challenges to the US dollar dominance appear limited. In modern history, there has been only one instance of a predominant currency switching, the replacement of the British pound by the dollar. The dollar rose to prominence after the financial crisis associated with World War I, then solidified itself. Solidified its international role after the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944. However, over the long horizon, there is more risk of a challenge to the dollar's international status, and some recent developments have potentially to boost the international usage of other currencies. Now, again, this is, the Federal Reserve recognizing this is taking place, right? There's little doubt that it's happening out there. Several commentators argue that sanctions imposed by the United States and its allies on Russia following the invasion of Ukraine may make the dollar less attractive as a reserve currency as geopolitical adversaries fear exposure to the US sanctions when relying on the US dollar as a reserve currency. So this is a lot of what people are saying. Like, these sanctions are pissing people off and they don't want to use the dollar. So, like, they're going to find another way, essentially, right? And they recognize that. I mean, this is, the geopolitical adversaries fear exposure of the U.S. sanctions, right? They straight up say it. However, documents that, the Weiss 2002 documents that about 3/4 of foreign government holdings of safe U.S. assets. Jesus, I can't speak today. All right, let's try that again. 3/4 of foreign government holdings of safe U.S. assets are already held by countries with some military tie to the United States. So 3/4 of the safe and liquid assets of the U.S. treasuries are held by people who are in military friendliness with the United States. 3/4 of it. All right. So when people are like, they're going to get out of the dollar, it's like, they're not really in the dollar to begin with, right? I mean, all these other nations are. All right. I mean, they are. There's 25%. It's a lot, but not compared to the 3/4 that is with the military-friendly United States, or friendly with the United States military. All right. Furthermore, other prominent reserve currencies such as the euro, Japanese yen, and the British pound all are issued by close U.S. allies who also participated in the sanctions on Russia. So all these other, these other reserve currencies that are out there do the same thing that the dollar did, right? Or that the United States did with the dollar. So they're like, we're all in the same boat here, right? Okay. Thus, geopolitical adversaries do not have many attractive alternatives to the U.S. dollar. And so, yeah, I mean, there's really nothing else they could do. They are almost essentially forced to set up their own system. Okay. Increased European integration is another possible source of challenge, as European Union is a large economy with a fairly deep financial market, generally free traded, and robust and stable institutions. During the COVID-19 crisis, the EU started to issue an unprecedented amount of jointly backed debt. Now, this is important to understand right here. The unprecedented amount of debt, right? This is because that's like almost like the key to it. The United States issues a ton of debt that people buy out there. They want that safe and liquid asset of the U.S. treasuries. A lot of people say, oh man, the government's doing bad. Yeah, but the rest of the world wants a safe and liquid asset. That debt is essentially, like, remember we were talking from Greenspan, gold is what essentially banks wanted to be paid in, right? And now eventually the gold was replaced by US treasuries. So now people hold US treasuries as an asset like they used to hold gold as an asset. Now the EU, right, with the unprecedented amount of jointly backed debt, which reached about 40 billion euros by May of 2023, while this is a large amount for the EU, it is small compared to the over 20 trillion of US treasuries outstanding, right? So 400 billion, it's huge, right? That's a lot, but yeah, it's not even close to the 20 trillion that the US has got going on, right? All right, but if fiscal integration progresses and a large liquid market for EU bonds, right? A large and liquid market for EU bonds was to develop, right? Develops over time. Think about this. If they were all of a sudden to start expanding their bond market and going into massive amounts of debt, like the United States has done to provide the world with a safe and liquid asset. This is what they're describing right here. Okay, let me go back and read it. But if fiscal integration progresses and a large liquid market for EU bonds develops, the EU could become more attractive as a reserve currency in the future. See, this is the key to it all, is that people think about it as just like, oh, they're like, the BRICS nations can do whatever. They're not going to go into debt like the United States has done. Nobody's going to trust them enough for them to be able to do that. So they're like, oh, we're going to do it in a gold currency. Okay, good luck with that, right? It ain't going to happen because the most industrious of those people are going to hoard all the gold and the rest of them are going to suffer in pain and misery. This is the way that the financial system has created the economy that we now live today, that is as expansive and robust and liquid as it possibly is. It's not safe, it's not a good thing, it's just the way it is. And to understand it means that you have to also understand that that sheer amount of US Treasury debt is what gives it the ability to be the world reserve currency, because people need that safe and liquid asset. Now, what they are describing, this is what the Federal Reserve is describing, is that if the EU was to be able to create a bond market, or the bond market was to grow, then the integration potentially, the EU could be more attractive as a reserve currency in the future because they would have that safe and liquid asset. This integration, it goes on to say here, this integration could potentially be accelerated by enhancements to the EU's sovereign debt market, right? Just them literally going into massive deficits, right? Going into debt. From the sovereign debt market infrastructure and introducing digital euros. Pretty interesting to think about right there, right? They don't go on to elaborate why. They just say and introducing a digital euro. Okay, additionally, the euro's prominent role in corporate and sovereign green finance could bolster its international status if these continue to grow. See, they're saying like, yeah, if they move into this whole corporate idea of the corporate and sovereign green finance, meaning that they are doing projects that are environmentally friendly, and with these projects they sell these particular bonds in for these projects. People buy the bonds. That bond is now the safe and liquid asset that they are looking for because of this green movement. If that was to take place and people were really encouraged by that, then they would be moving their money into those green projects. And this is where they're saying that they could like basically sell these bonds into that particular movement. All right. Let me go back and read it. Additionally, the euro's prominent role in the corporate and sovereign green finance could bolster its international status if these continue to grow. However, even with more fiscal integration, remaining political separation will continue to cause policy uncertainty. All right. So this is like the runner-up, right? The EU is the runner-up for the world reserve currency, not the BRICS. Right? The BRICS don't even come close. Right? The EU has like at least a position that you can see. I mean, it's way off there. It's just like comparatively the dollar. It's like you can see it over there. It's not much, but it's there and it has potential. But the rest of it is just like not even coming close to what the dollar is doing. Okay. Goes on here to say, another source of challenges to the US dollar dominance could be the continued rapid growth of China, right? So now this is what everybody's talking about. Now China's it. China's the one who's got all the money. They've got the manufacturing. They're the ones who are going to do this, right? Okay, so it's going to be China. Dollar dominance could be continued. Oh, I'm sorry. Another source of challenges to the US dollar dominance could be the continued and rapid growth of China, which is by far the world's largest exporter, though it lags the United States by value of imports. And this is coming from the IMF Direction of Trade Statistics 2021 Q2. All right. China's GDP already exceeds US GDP on a purchasing power parity basis. And that was coming from the IMF World Economic Outlook, July 2021, and may exceed US GDP in nominal terms in the 2030s. However, as China population is declining, forecasters generally do not expect China's economy to outgrow the US economy by more than 30%. A size difference of this magnitude may not be enough to overcome the significant roadblocks to more widespread use of the Chinese renminbi. They're basically saying this may not be enough. And so it goes on to say, Chinese renminbi, importantly, the renminbi is not freely exchangeable. And this is another time, like, I think people like have a misunderstanding of what it is that's taking place, because China is not something that is like on the same thing that the United States is doing, right? I mean, they're very controlling and tyrannical, and I'm not saying like the United States doesn't have their own form of that, but ultimately, that's important to remember is that the renminbi is not freely exchangeable. The Chinese capital account is not open, and investors' confidence in Chinese institution is relatively low. And I have to, again, right at the beginning of this video, I was asking people, it was just like, if you're truly into the BRICS and you think that the BRICS are going to totally be this, the winner in this game, then you got to dump all your money out of dollars and get into the, rock solid renminbi. Like how many people are going to do that? Nobody's going to do that stuff, right? I mean, some people might, but like, not anybody who's serious, right? To overcome these shortcomings, China has recently increased efforts to promote renminbi in invoicing. For example, it reached an agreement with Brazil to allow Chinese and Brazilian companies to settle trade in their domestic currencies rather than the US dollars. And this is where like information like this, I believe, gets blown out of proportion because like, yeah, okay, you set this up so that this country can do it. And it's not saying that you can't do it. You can definitely do it. But like, how much is this really like impacting the rest of the global trade? And it goes on to say here, it is also in discussion with Saudi Arabia to potentially price oil trade in renminbi. Outside analysis generally view these agreements as symbolic, as mostly laying the groundwork for potential future usage of the Chinese renminbi. Right? It's not anything real. It's just symbolic. It's like, here, let's try this out. Let's throw it out there and see how it works. All right? Test the theories. Okay, it goes on. This is the last little bit here, guys. A shifting payments landscape could also result in challenges to the United States dollar's dominance. For example, the rapid growth of digital currencies. Now, this is where the Bitcoin idea starts to come in, right? Both private sector and officials could reduce reliance on the US dollar. Changing consumer and investor preferences, combined with the possibility of a new product or of new products, could shift the balance of perceived cost and benefits enough to overcome some of the inertia that helps to maintain the dollar's leading role. Right? So basically, they're saying, hey, we got all these different forms out there and they can just use it all on their own. They're like, what do we do? Right? That said, it is possible. I have a YouTube channel and I can't get these words out. Technological, there we go, progress may solidify the dominant role of the dollar. For example, about 99% of stablecoin market capitalization is linked to the US dollar, implying that crypto assets are de facto traded in US dollars. So, like, they're all traded in dollars, right? And essentially in the end. All right. In sum, absent any large-scale political or economic changes which damage the value of the US dollar as a store of value or medium of exchange, and simultaneously bolster the attractiveness of dollar alternatives, the dollar will likely remain the world's dominant international currency for the foreseeable future. And that's the point of it all. Like, it's not a matter of if the dollar is going to fail. That part is true, right? I mean, it's just a matter of time and eventually it will fail. But how far out into the future is that really going to be? And then what is that going to look like? And like, how does that happen? People are just saying, oh, it can just like, they'll just start trading in gold. Well, you can't just trade in gold. Like, if you could just trade in gold, then go do it, right? Like, right now, you could take your moment, get paid, go right down to the coin store, switch it over to silver, and you could be like on your own silver standard. Now go and try and operate in the economy. It's very difficult, right? You go down to the grocery store, they don't accept silver. You go down to the gas station, they don't accept silver. Right? You're trying to pay your bills, your electric bill. They don't accept silver. Why? Because they got bills to pay. And their bills are due in dollars, just like everybody else is. And so for the most part, you're going to be in the same position that the rest of the world is when they're trying to deal in silver as well. Now, if you do find people who are industrious, who will be willing to accept your silver, then they are going to hoard it for themselves, and then eventually everybody will be deprived. And this is called the business cycle. They will have an equilibrium to be found as they redistribute that silver back out there to the rest of the world. Now, I'm not saying that it isn't something that we could do or couldn't do. I mean, sure, we could handle a gold standard just fine. But what it would take to go back to this and how we would end up through these massive deflationary episodes trying to figure out where the price balances should be would be absolutely devastating and miserable for people to go through. And again, like I'm kind of cool with it. Like I mean, I'm all right. I can figure that part out. I know how to deal with it. So let's go ahead and go to a gold standard. But I think most of the people would end up suffering in pain and misery because of it. All right, let's go check out the super chat real quick here, guys. All right, LaRocca, $5. Thank you so much. UE, do you think the next special purpose vehicle by the Fed will be related to tokenized bonds pegged to stable coins? Been reading about tokenization a lot. Wow, that's interesting. To be honest, I haven't really heard about them using a special purpose vehicle for that idea. Um, from what I can gather, it's like at least from the general picture, like I don't know, like necessarily like the little tiny, how do you say it, like the tools that they will use to implement all this stuff. Like I mean, I don't know how, like, the technical way that the banking system operates. Like I can understand how the Fed funds rates are set. I understand repo markets. I understand that other stuff. But as far as like trying to figure out how it is that they are going to implement a particular tokenization of the bond market and stuff like that, I mean, I'm not computer tech savvy or anything like that. So what I kind of envision is in more of in a general term. And what will end up happening is that you're going to find a moment in which that they're going to go and try and stimulate the economy, and they're not going to be able to do it because they can't drop the interest rates enough. This is something we talk about enough on this channel that everybody should, like, if you follow me on this channel, you've heard me say this, right? The Federal Reserve and the interest rate adjustments no longer stimulates the economy. It's all about their words. Okay. So they're gonna have to figure out a way to inject that money into the system, like literally like force feed money into us. And with that means that they are going to have to figure out a way to like either literally like mail out checks or those debit cards or fill our bank accounts. But if they have it in a cryptocurrency form where everybody has a wallet, they can just immediately launch that money right into the wallets, and it can be deployed like into the economy in all kinds of fashions. And they would actually have a pretty good way of being able, excuse me, to distribute this money, being able to track through the wallets, how it goes, all that stuff. Okay. Now, if you think about like what it is that they're really trying to do, they're trying to use negative interest rates. This is really what it comes down to, is that if they could take interest rates into negative territory, then essentially eliminating the lower bound. Now, the lower bound is a problem for the Federal Reserve because once interest rates hit zero, most people are not going to like accept a negative interest rate. So they'll just pull their money out in cash. So if you pull your money out in cash, then this whole system doesn't really work. But if there is no cash to pull out and it's all in a digital form, then it's stuck in the system. And so this is really where they're moving to with the stable coins or the central bank digital currencies or whatever, is to move into what they can have as a cashless society. Now, the reason why they want to do this is to, again, to take those interest rates into negative territory. Now, this isn't me just making this up, by the way. This is actually coming from the IMF. And I don't know if I can find it right away. Let me see. This is actually coming from the IMF. From years ago, talking about e-currency and how to have a cashless society using it. And so ultimately what they will do is they will create this e-currency, have these two like forms of currency going at the same time, like the dollar system like we would understand it, and then this like e-currency system that would be within the banking system. And again, this is how the IMF was describing it long before central banks and all this other stuff. Um, Let me see if I can find it here for you guys. Uh, so anyway, the idea behind that is that if they can create this other e-currency, then they can start pulling cash out of the system by making it a nuisance, right? They'll say, okay, if you're going to withdraw cash or deposit cash within the banking system, we're going to charge you a fee for that, and that fee is going to match the negative interest rate that is attached to the e-currency or the tokenized currency, or what we're going to probably refer to now from now on will be like central bank digital currencies. They will put a negative interest rate attached to that and then charge a fee for cash going into the banking system that essentially matches that digital currency negative interest rate that's attached to that. And so you'll have no other choice. It'll be like, okay, so we got this cash, which is a nuisance. Stores won't accept it as at face value anymore. They're going to charge you a fee because they're getting charged a fee. So everybody's going to move over to central bank digital currencies and be within that system and not have to deal with the fact that they're losing or paying fees and having a nuisance to deal with cash. And this is how they're essentially going to create this cashless society. Now, of course, they won't go negative right away with it, right? They'll pull the cash out by making it, a nuisance or whatever, and then eventually start putting the screws to the people. So I kind of just breezed over it real quick, but that's essentially how it's going to end up going down. Now, the Federal Reserve can't really do a central bank digital currency. It's not necessarily legal within their charter. So the idea that they could just print up a coin and just hand it out there, not really. It doesn't work like that. Now, what they can do, and this is kind of interesting how this idea works, is that they can buy these special bonds, right? So if they buy a particular bond from the Treasury, like say it was an emergency bond or something of that nature, then they can buy these bonds and issue out tokens on the name of that bond, right? But this is like essentially monetizing the debt. They're not really supposed to do that. They're supposed to buy these bonds from the open market, which means the primary dealers are the ones who end up buying the stuff, and then eventually they buy it from the primary dealers. Oh, it looks like part of the family's back. So anyway, where was I going with that? Oh, so anyway, there might be these special bonds in which that they can buy and then inject the money into the system going that route, or figure out another way to change the charter around or something of that nature. But ultimately, like having the own central bank digital currency, something like that, is going to be very difficult. So stable coins, right? Stable coins are pretty much developed by anybody who wants to do it. Put the coin basically out there with a dollar backing it. And with this system, essentially any monetary policy that the Federal Reserve is conducting would be transferred into that stable coin. All right, the family's back here. How was trick-or-treating, guys? Yeah? I'm live streaming. You want to show off what you got? Oh, Luna's. Luna, show. Yeah.
We're trick-or-treating. Got a little ton of candy. And one guy said trick-or-treat. I picked trick and I got socks.
You got socks. You picked for a trick.
I did trick and I got socks.
And you got socks. All right. Okay, so the family's back. Oh, you guys want to hit me up with another super chat? Okay. Maybe I should move out to the car. Luna's super excited to see everybody. Oh, are they? All right. Will Christian with the $5 super chat. Thank you so much. All right. It says hedge funds are creating the largest short position on 2-year bonds. Do you see the short position a signal that smart money knows something? I mean, I guess that would probably good. I would have to think about it for just a minute to really come up with a good answer on that. But do I think that they are positioning themselves, short positioning on that? I mean, if they see the move, then I would imagine that they would take advantage of it. But the manipulation within the market is so prevalent that I don't really look at something like that as being something that how do I put this? It's like same idea of taking the silver short position idea. All these banks out there have sold out a bunch of paper silver and they're now sitting short on silver, and that if the silver price ever went up, they would never be able to cover those short position kind of things. I mean, I've heard this story so much, about these manipulations and stuff like that, that I have a tendency to really not take it too much, as far as that impactful of an event. Is it a sign that they see stuff? I don't know. Probably. I mean, there's a lot of people who are predicting some really crazy stuff to come into the future here. A lot of people are still predicting recessionary pressures of, mass magnitude. So, I mean, do they see it? I mean, I would assume that, the smart money probably is a much better, position to follow than the retail kind of thing. But again, like, you know, I would have to kind of give it some more thought and to really kind of roll that stuff over. But I don't know. The whole manipulation game seems to be so prevalent throughout much of the market that I have a tendency to back away from that stuff. I don't really look at what markets are doing as my economic indicator or anything like that. I use my understanding of what I see within the distribution network, within retail space, within the lumber industry, my understanding of macroeconomics, and then my understanding of the monetary, you know, policies coming from the Federal Reserve. And those are the combinations of things that I look at when I think about what it is that other people look at when they say, like, you know, all these banking systems are about ready to collapse. And that was really big news a couple of years ago. And there was people who, you know, got millions of views on their YouTube channel talking about how should get your money out of the bank as soon as possible before the collapse happens. I was putting out videos saying, well, you know, yeah, you should probably be pretty concerned about that. But the Federal Reserve has talked about this situation in that they have like lifeboats, so to speak. I didn't know it was going to be the Bank Term Funding Program. Like, they didn't talk about that part of it, but they just like basically ultimately admitted that they knew this was coming. So my concern level of it was pretty low, because if they see it coming, and they know about it, and they talk about the tools that they can deploy that are not necessarily like advertised out there, then like, I don't know, all these other people may not have known that. And so yeah, your fear and anxiety would be pretty ripping if you knew that there was going to be a downturn. Yeah, what's up, Coop?
Guess what I got?
What you got some socks?
Yeah.
All right, good for you,
I'm
man.
just thirsty.
Yeah, get yourself some water, bro.
I have one of those.
Yeah, one of those fans.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, the more affluent communities. What are you guys talking about? Okay, all-nighter, are those screws or are they holes? Right back here, these are anchors. Are you guys talking about those things? And they were anchors that held, I don't know, something, picture or something there. But it's the kind that butterfly. So ultimately it's a hollow wall anchor, and as you put the screw in there, on the inside of the drywall is essentially a bracket, like, so to speak. But really what it is, it's how do I describe it? I don't know, like some metal that hinges in the back. So as you're running the screw in, it pulls this other metal to it, and it flours the back of the bracket out on the inside of the drywall. So it pins this bracket to the drywall. You can't really get it out without knocking it out. So it just creates an even bigger hole. So I don't know if we were going to hang a picture or something over the top of it, but that's what's going on with that. That's not like holes in the walls. That's a bracket right there. Butterfly anchor. All right, that's a better way to describe it. I work at a hardware store. It's actually called a molly. Right, that's what it's called. It's called a molly anchor. All right. Because like a lot of times people will refer to as the toggle bolts as a butterfly. You know, and those are the ones that, like, you know, the alligator little clippy thing that you can poke in there and then have a hollow wall anchor that way. A lot of people will call those butterflies, you know. Thanks, Simon, for answering my question. Oh, yeah, you bet, Will, anytime, man. I mean, especially send me a super chat. I almost have no other choice but to answer your question. Hey, UE, thoughts on the Fed cutting 50 basis points next week? Okay, so this is a question that has constantly hit me, like, as, you know, as we do this channel here, so I'm a little bit more centered. As we do this YouTube channel and we talk about monetary policy, we hear this a lot, talking about like what's going to happen with interest rates, what's going to happen with the Fed funds rate, what are they going to do, how much are they going to cut, la la la, right? Okay, let me ask you something. If you were to have a crystal ball that told you exactly what the Federal Reserve was going to do at the last meeting, but you knew 3 months ahead of time, right? You knew 3 months ahead of time that the Federal Reserve was going to have a particular move, and you knew exactly what it was going to be without a doubt, right? You could read the future, and it was going to happen, right? Now, let me ask you something. 3 months ahead of time, before you knew that the Federal Reserve, or before the Federal Reserve actually adjusted rates, you knew that they were going to do it. What position would you have taken? Knowing that the Federal Reserve was going to cut 50 basis points, would you have bought the house then, knowing that the interest rates were going to get cut? You didn't know what they were going to do, like what was going to happen with mortgage rates and stuff like that. All you knew is that the Federal Reserve was going to cut. You had no idea what was going to be the reaction from the markets. You just knew what the Fed funds rate was going to do. And so asking me the question, I have to ask you that question, because if you would have bought the house, you made your decision. It was like, I was thinking about buying the house, but I didn't know because if the Fed cuts, I might be able to get a better deal. Would you have bought the house knowing that the Fed was about ready to cut? Right? Probably not. I mean, most people would have taken the logical thought that if the Fed cuts rates, mortgage rates would come down. This was a common narrative. I tried to tell people, don't worry about the rate cuts. It's not about the rate cuts. It's about the communication about the rate cuts. It's what ends up coming into the markets, the narrative. That is the monetary policy. The interest rate adjustment thing that they do over here, they talk about all this stuff, the interest rates, they write it on the wall, they talk about it. Not so important, all right? Not so important at all. Their communications going out there to the public, the way that they distribute this information, have all these different Fed governors coming out and talking about all their beliefs and ideas and where interest rates should go and stuff like that. That is the monetary policy. If you were like, oh man, the Fed is going to cut rates, I'm going to take out the mortgage rate right now. I'm going to take out the mortgage right now because I know that the mortgage rates are going to go up if the Fed cuts. Who would have said that? Not very many people. I tried to tell people, don't worry about the rate cuts. Listen to the Fed's words, right? Because that's going to be more impactful than anything out there. And so as people just won't hear that, they don't want to understand the credible threat. They don't want to believe it. They don't want to think that that's really what's happening here, because they have been so not only just trained, but it's ingrained into them to look at how the Federal Reserve operates their monetary policy through rate adjustments to be the biggest deal, because that's what impacts their lives. But they don't understand how it is that the communication about that actually adjusts the rates within the real economy out there, meaning like the mortgage rates, the treasury rates, all this other stuff that's happening out there comes from market perception and how they're reacting to it. And so don't worry about the rate cuts. Who cares? Listen to their communication. That is the important part, because that is going to be more impactful on what's going to end up happening within the economy. The rate adjustments just simply aren't it anymore. But the communication about it is. And that's what's hard, because most people they don't understand that. They can't, I understand, even saying it out loud, it sounds difficult to try and wrap your head around. But once you understand the credible threat theory behind it, then you get it. You get how this works. I mean, even the whole idea of the BRICS nations, in my mind, I think all the way back to the credible threat theory again. Because the Federal Reserve is not in a position that's easy to deal with. You do realize that, right? The Federal Reserve has to come up with this liability to provide to the world. All these people have written out these debts that are due in dollars. They have no way of accessing these dollars during crisis times. And the Federal Reserve has to figure out a way to get these dollars out there to the world to prevent the world from falling into a complete crisis, right? Dog's going nuts over there. And so when you think about it in this fashion, it's how is it Lou Nuts? Hey. And so, barking dog, quiet. Come here. Be quiet. And so when you think about how it is that the Federal Reserve is supposed to get these dollars out there to the rest of the world, it becomes very difficult, because the Fed is buying the government debt, and the government is on an unsustainable debt path. They can't continue down this road, and the Fed is okay, so what is it we're going to do if we don't buy into the federal or into the government debt? What is it that we are going to buy in order to provide the world with this liability? Now, they do have the ability to buy foreign assets. We talked about this from, Ben Bernanke talked about this back in 2002. They've already got this legal authority to do it. Now, they don't participate in that market because that's part of the U.S. government's job, not necessarily the Federal Reserve's job, to interfere with the international monetary fund, or not necessarily the fund, the international FX markets, like the international foreign exchange markets and stuff like that. That's not part of the Federal Reserve's job to deal with that. That's the U.S. government's job. And if they all of a sudden start buying into foreign assets, that's exactly what they are doing, is participating in that. So this isn't exactly like something that they are like up for doing, right? This isn't like their job, so to speak, is to buy into these foreign assets, but then they got to find something to buy in order to provide the world with the liability, which is the cash, right? Like the Federal Reserve notes, right? The reserves out there. And so now I think about this, it was just like, so what is it that the Federal Reserve is going to do? Because they're going to have a downturn. They're going to have to figure out something to buy in order to print the money. And you have to think, okay, is it going to be the U.S. government debt that they're going to buy? Or is it going to be foreign assets? Or what? Like, what is it that they are going to buy? Because they have to buy something. And now when I think about this, it's just like, okay, so why are they buying this again? Is to provide the world with liquidity. Okay, so getting this liquidity out there to the world, why is it that they need to provide this liquidity out there to the world, considering that the world has all this liquidity out there? Is because it's in strong hands. I mean, people hoard money. I mean, just simple as that. Just people hoard money. There's plenty of money out there, right? There's dollars everywhere. But yet, during times of crisis, times of concern, people hoard the money. And so now I think about this. Okay, it's like mattress money out there, so to speak. In a way, right? People like just have this money sitting, but they don't want to use it for anything, so now they have it. If it's not being deployed, it's not out there chasing goods and services, it's not out there being invested, it's not out there doing something, it's being hoarded. And so now the Federal Reserve is like, okay, we got an issue, we got to figure out a way to provide the world with liquidity, liabilities, and we got to buy some assets. So it means the government goes on an unsustainable debt path. And okay, we could buy the foreign stuff, but that's not really our job. What is it that we're going to do? You know what? There's a bunch of cash in tight hands. Maybe we can just piss the people off enough that they'll want to get out of the dollar and literally provide liquidity to the world by getting out of the dollar itself. That way we don't have to produce more of it. We just get people to stop using it. And then we won't put the government on an unsustainable debt path. Yeah. See, this is a credible threat theory that you can only take on if you understand that this is the way that they conduct themselves. And once you see it, it's a lot easier. It's just like, okay, this actually does make a lot of sense, considering that the Federal Reserve is put into a very tight bind. I mean, they can go ahead and destroy the U.S. government, I guess, but that's not really what, like, I don't believe that that is their intention, right? Like, I don't believe that that's really, like, there's some people out there going, oh yeah, that's definitely what they're going to do. Okay, cool. I don't, right? I don't think that that's going to be what it is that the Federal Reserve is intending on doing, is crashing the entire government and then making us all like, absolute debt slaves that have no other choice but to eat gruel and work, 16 hours a day. I don't like, okay, I mean, I guess it's possible. I mean, but I'm thinking differently. All right. Let's see here. The fact that Hawk2a made $1 million proves beyond any doubt that there's still too many dollars floating around. Hey, some people just got some of us have to work every day to go out there, bust our ass, figure it out, put videos, go do day jobs, do everything that we can, and we're still not going to have $1 million by doing it. Other people can tell a joke. Okay. Some people can tell a joke and capitalize on that and make, and do quite well. That's awesome. I mean, I'm not for that. I don't think anything negative about any of that. She knocked it out of the park. Cool, good for her. I mean, not all of us are that lucky, but hey, I pay my bills on time. I'm cool. Simon should do a tariff on the candy. Yeah, believe me, I will. The Snickers will not last, being the best candy bar here on earth. All right, UE, do you think the US dollar will be backed by Bitcoin? No, I do not. I remember you mentioned the Fed Now program a while ago. Yeah, I don't think, in fact, there's, what is it here? I got it here on my file. Let me bring it up. Banning Bitcoin. Okay, there's this paper, working paper, that is called Unique Implementation of Permanent Primary Deficits. And now I haven't read through this entire thing because it's quite long, and to be honest with you, it's kind of a little bit of a difficult read. But just to give you an idea, this paper is all about Bitcoin. And they mentioned Bitcoin 109 times inside of this working paper. So it's very much discussed inside of it. Now, I'll just read you the abstract from this because, again, it gets kind of difficult here, but it goes like this. In an economy with incomplete markets and consumers who are sufficiently risk averse, we show that the government can uniquely implement a permanent primary deficit using nominal debt and continuous Markov strategies for primary deficits and payments to debt holders. But this result fails if there is also useless pieces of paper, Bitcoin for short, that can be traded. If there is trade in Bitcoin, then there is no continuous Markov strategy for the government that leads to unique implementation. Instead, there is a continuum of equilibria with the distinct real allocations in which the price of Bitcoin converges to zero. And there is a balanced budget trap. Continuous government policy designed for a permanent primary deficit cannot eliminate an alternative steady state in which, they go into this algorithm thing, and the government is forced to balance its budget. A legal prohibition against Bitcoin can restore unique implementation of permanent primary deficits, and so can a tax on Bitcoin at the rate of, and then they get this other algorithm. Okay, so banning Bitcoin essentially is part of the Federal Reserve strategy, and it's not so much necessarily the banning of Bitcoin. I mean, I don't know if you can really necessarily ban Bitcoin. I don't think they have much choice in it. It's just like, we can use it regardless of what you say. It's just like they can ban like the idea of using it in, like, say, like business works. Like they can, like if you get business license and stuff like that, and then create laws that say you can't use it in that kind of fashion, but they can't really stop the people from using it. So like if you choose to use Bitcoin, I mean, what are they going to do? It's like they don't. It's like there's nothing they can do. It's like they don't have any other choice in that. It's like it's regardless of them. So no, I don't think that the dollar will be backed by Bitcoin. That's not something that I think the dollar. Well, first of all, the whole fiat currency system couldn't really handle any kind of serious limitation on a commodity such as Bitcoin. Just simply because the fiat currency would be limited to the amount of Bitcoin that they could hold, and that would be like, very limited in supply. If the rest of the world was diving into it as well, then there would be even less supply. The failure of the United States would be almost imminent, right after, or like would definitely be imminent, considering that we don't produce anything, so therefore we wouldn't be able to get new Bitcoin in. Nobody's going to lend us Bitcoin. I mean, not like that. So no, like that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is going to be a situation in which that we tokenize the currency, like I was saying, and that the increasing of government debt, I would assume, would be the only thing that really would give the Federal Reserve the ability to continue to expand the money supply. And at a negative interest rate, it's going to be a very odd economy to even operate in, considering like, what it would be like to have like a negative interest rate on actual loans or something of that nature. It's just like it really boggles the mind to consider how deep that would actually go, or if it would even get into that some sort of realm of possibilities. So how that actually would go down is still very difficult. And again, like this can all change due to changes of the law, right? To the way that the Federal Reserve conducts themselves as far as like the legal authorities that they do have on what it is that they can purchase as far as, put on their balance sheet to create the dollars. who knows? They might start diving into foreign assets after the tokenizing of it, because then you can control where those assets go. Like if you buy assets, or you buy like the debt of a foreign nation, the Federal Reserve does, right? But it's done, instead of paper, it's done with cryptocurrencies. Now, when that money moves over into that nation after buying their debt, you can keep it in that nation. It's just like the money doesn't work anywhere else because it's tokenized, right? You can control the wallets and how they operate and everything that goes on with it. So it's like, yeah, you can have this money, but you got to keep it. It can't leave your nation, right? Or until you pay us back or something like that. And then you can kind of control where it is that the money is going and how it is being used. Again, that's just like, that's just me in my imagination kind of going off, but I kind of see it happening, something of that nature. How far are we into this? Okay, an hour. Any other questions? You guys want to go? I'm gonna call it quits here because these guys are, Hooded Bible Thumper Simon, is there any bills you pay that you could do without? Oh yeah, like, well, I pay for a gym membership because Freddie uses it quite a bit. He does like the weight training kind of thing, and he's really wanting to do like the athletics and stuff. So I do have like that. I probably could cut back a little bit on the cell services, because we have some phones and we have like internet access on those. So I could probably cut that back a little bit. No, not really, because like I live a very tight, like meager life. I don't like all my stuff. Like all Nighter's been over to my place. I mean, he knows I ain't got a lot of shit around here. I don't have much, and so it's like I don't even want stuff. Like I don't. Like I mean, material possessions to me are they're kind of cool for a minute, but that's it. Like I would rather just enjoy experiences and stuff. So like to me, it's just not. I don't have a lot of stuff. I certainly don't have a lot of subscriptions or bills or anything like that. What's happening, brother? All right.
Good trading done?
Fred, the SEC had already called BTC property and not a security. Hey Economist, just joined, so not sure how long you've been online. For 57 minutes now. But could you discuss why gold reserves couldn't make a comeback again pre-World War II? Every country used the gold standard. Well, why do you know why the gold standard really left? I mean, a lot of people just want to say it was because the government wanted control over the people, and and just cut it at that, and just say if you don't see it that way, then you're obviously just kind of ignorant or whatever. Like I mean, that's easy enough to say. It's kind of like just saying money printer go off, prices go up, right? It's just like very simple, let it go, right? But it goes much deeper than that. And so to understand why it is that the gold standard was removed essentially from the use as a world reserve currency is to understand how the dollar ended up being in a symbiotic relationship with the dollar or with the gold. So now if we understand that like gold transactions is really what everybody wanted, right? They wanted to participate in transactions using gold, and they wanted it settled in gold. And that was not uncommon, right? I mean, 5,000 years of history was saying this is the way it goes down. However, there's a limitation to how much gold is available out there to do transactions with. I mean, just think about it. If you say we're all sitting around, there's 4 of us, right? We have a gold coin, right? We split this gold coin into quarters, and now each of us starts sharing this gold coin to start doing business. Well, now that's all well and good, but then start adding more people in. And now we got to split this coin into smaller pieces. Now our services have to get cheaper. There's a deflationary aspect to it. Well, if we have debts that we paid, we borrowed money to do something, and you have a deflationary currency, it's getting difficult to acquire that currency. That means you are essentially being punished for being a debtor. So most people won't be borrowing money. Well, if you're not borrowing money, you're probably not going to start businesses. And if you're in a deflationary scenario, you're most likely probably not going to be buying products to sell, because you would have to constantly mark those things down, taking the loss from the original purchasing of it. So deflationary scenarios are very bad. Like, that's not the condition in which that people want to be in. Now, the saver in that moment is going to love it, because they're going to have all this stuff that goes on sale, but ultimately the economy is slowing down, and it ends up being in a position in which that it makes it very difficult to operate it. This is the business cycle, because once this happens, then commerce starts taking off again, and then the accumulation of gold starts to happen. So if you're prepared and ready to deal with this business cycle, then you can have gold as a currency, but you are going to suffer the consequences of the gold getting concentrated to the most industrious people. They end up raising their standard of living. They end up buying into foreign production, and that's the redistribution of the gold until they eventually fall into pain and misery again, because this is essentially just how it goes. It's part of the Cantillon effect, and to understand that Cantillon effect, right? So now what happened back, here with the United States is we were a very industrious nation, and we were importing a lot of gold. As we imported that gold, we started to deprive the rest of the world of their gold, because we had it, right? So now they are like, hey, we want our gold back, but we have this paper currency out there, right? So now we have this paper currency that says, hey, you can use this dollars and you can exchange it for gold. Okay, well, if we're exchangeable for gold, and it's like gold, and it's just kind of the same thing, then you end up using it. So people were like, yeah, okay, fine, it's the same thing as gold, let's just use these paper dollars. Well, paper dollars is a hell of a lot easier to do transactions, and now you can really do a lot of efficient transactions across the globe using paper money as opposed to physical gold, because physical gold has to be transferred, protected, secured, all the other stuff that goes with it. It's very difficult to actually do transactions with gold, but it's really easy to do it with paper. And since everybody really just wants to eat and work, they don't really care what it is that they're doing out there as far as currency goes. They just want to be able to, transact. Dollars were as good as gold. They probably questioned it at the time, but they were just willing to accept it, because hell, you could just take your money down and go and get the gold. So now all these dollars are out there starting to do commerce. The rest of the world is loving it. They're eating it up. Right? They're doing their business, they're doing transactions, they're starting to build up this huge economy, and then one day they start asking for the gold back in the United States. We can't do that, right? We can't do that. You guys, you wanted to do transactions. You didn't have to accept the dollars. You could have said, nah, I know they're as good as gold, but I want the gold. They could have said that. I mean, everybody could have said that. We, the people, could have said that, right? We chose not to. We chose to use dollars because they were so easy to use. And since, they were demanding to be the ability to do transactions, and they convinced the government and the people out there that during these downturns in the business cycle, or not necessarily a downturn, but the fall in currency during the increase in business, right? Because that's essentially what was happening, is that the economy would heat up and the concentration of wealth would begin to happen. Well, as that took place, the Federal Reserve is like, hey, we can have an elastic money supply, and they start dumping this money into the system to try and keep the economy rolling, right? So this elastic money supply was going to be added to the economy during hot times and then pulled out of the economy during slow times, right? So it's amazing how things have changed since then. So understanding it from that point of view is just like, okay, so we had a gold standard that created a situation in which that we had risen as a nation because we were so industrious. We had this high standard of living, and then we started buying into foreign production, and pretty soon those gold coins, all that gold was going to leave the United States, and we were going to find ourselves in pain and misery as we were not the industrious nation that we once were. So, I mean, it's cool. I'm down for it. I'm totally down for it. I mean, let's have a gold standard. I mean, I think I can, handle it, just from my understanding of macroeconomics and history and theories and everything else. I think I could handle a gold standard myself. But most of the people out there will not. They will fail, and they will fail miserably, because most people don't know how to save for a rainy day. Right? They don't understand how business cycles work. They think that this thing will just continue on forever, not knowing that it is cyclical. look up look up Triffin's Dilemma. Triffin's Dilemma was in the glut of dollars. I think that's let me see if I can find that. Is this thing still? Yeah. Let me see. Triffin's Paradox. Glut of dollars. I think there was this IMF here. Let me see if I can find it here. You're not going to work now. No, it's not going to come up. Oh, sorry guys. My computer's just failing me here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is coming out of the IMF, and literally I just Googled the glut of dollars, and so I guess if you just put in glut of dollars, IMF, it says system in crisis 1959 to 1971. And now this is pretty interesting to read, because again, this is coming directly from the IMF stuff here. Oh, I got another super chat. I'll check that out here in a second. All right, providing reserves and exchanges for the whole world is too much for one country and one currency to bear. This is Henry Fowler, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, who had said that. I don't know what year, but anyway. It goes on. Increasingly, the IMF and the international community realized that the Bretton Woods system, based on the gold standard and using dollars as the main reserve currency, had a serious flaw. The post-war dollar gap abroad had become a dollar glut by 1960. Liquidity and deficits. Continuous U.S. balance of payments deficits during the 1950s have provided the world with liquidity. The continuous U.S. balance of payments deficits during the 1950s had provided the world with liquidity, but had also caused dollar reserves to build up in the central banks of Europe and Japan. As the central banks redeemed these dollars for gold, the U.S. gold reserves dipped dangerously low. Right? See, this is the problem that was faced. They were like, here's the money, and they were like, well, and the whole world was like, here's your money, and we're like, ooh, no, right? Yeah, can't be having that. You're going to take our gold if we do that. How could the threatened system be fixed? Goes on to say here, if there was too many dollars out there, why didn't the United States simply stop spending so much abroad? The United States enjoyed the benefits of being able to spend money freely. This is straight out of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, saying this, right? They spend money freely, such as requiring commodities and consumer products from abroad. In addition, the U.S. foreign policy goal of containing communism in the face of the Cold War and I don't get it, right? Decolonization kept the dollars flowing. Triffin's Dilemma. Testifying before the U.S. Congress in 1960, economist Robert Triffin exposed fundamental problems in the international monetary system. If the United States stopped running balance of payment deficits, the international community would lose its largest source of additions to reserves. See, this is the problem. Like the world is demanding dollars, and the Fed in the United States was just like, okay, we'll buy your stuff, and here's the dollars. Right? The result, and this is the community would lose its largest source of additions to reserves. The resulting shortage of liquidity could pull the world economy into contraction spiral, leading to instability. If the U.S. deficits continued, a steady stream of dollars would continue to fuel the world growth. You hear this? If the U.S. deficits continued, a steady stream of dollars would continue to fuel the world economic growth. However, excessive U.S. deficits, dollar glut, would erode confidence in the value of U.S. dollars. Without confidence in the dollar, it would no longer be accepted as the world reserve currency. The fixed rate of exchange system could break down, leading to instability. Yeah. And so again, this is the situation. There was the goal was fine, right? The problem was that it created issues that people didn't want to deal with. right? Mainly it was cyclical. You would have a concentration of wealth and a redistribution back into equilibrium and a concentration of wealth again. And when people saw that concentration of wealth and they were in poverty and misery and pain and suffering and they were pissed off about it, they said, do something about this. And the government was just like, okay, you're all gonna set paper. And people were like, yeah, there you go, right? You don't have to. And people were like, yeah, we don't, but we don't, right? And so they took it. And then this is the situation that we're now in from it. I don't blame anybody for it. I mean, really, it was the people's fault. They shouldn't have accepted it. They should have said no, right? It's like, this isn't acceptable currency. We're not using the Federal Reserve notes. We're only accepting, gold and silver certificates and physical coins. And that will be the end of that. Right? And somebody says, well, here's your paper that you have to work for, and it'd be like, no, I ain't working. And then it wouldn't have done it. Like, we wouldn't have lost the gold standard. It would still be a gold standard today. But the people didn't do that. The people were like, whatever, I'm hungry and I want to sell my stuff. So, they just that's it, Luna's, I know, girl. I know, you're such a good dog. You're a very high-strung girl. Huh. And it's raining out there. You don't like the rain. You're like a little princess dog. Alright. You want to be on camera? Can you see you guys? Dog wants attention. Let's go check out that super chat there. Larry Bird, appreciate you, Yui. Yeah, you bet, man. Thank you so much for the $1.99. Okay. I think she wants to go out. Anyway, it's getting late. I think we should probably go ahead and call it quits. Happy Halloween, gang. Yeah, you guys are awesome. Thank you for hanging out while I sit in my kitchen, doing my live stream. I've never really done one from inside the house. You can make love to your money. Nah, that's weird. All right. Take her walk. She wants her walk and snacky. Okay, let's go outside. All right. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much. And we'll see you on the next one. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.